Hello, everybody from Alexandria, Virginia, here on the Sports Clock. I'm so honored to have my next guest on. We've been trying to do this for a while, but I move so much that it's hard to kind of get consistent, but so glad to have on Marshall, Missouri native, Missouri Sports Hall of Famer. He's been the voice of the Missouri State Bears since the 80s, does radio for the Kansas City Chiefs. And I think, Art, most importantly, an inspiration, not just with sports, but obviously you had the battle with West Nile virus, and I'm going to try not to choke up, but what an inspiration you are, and I'm just so honored to have you on, Art.
Well, Tyler, it's my pleasure to be on with you. We go back to your days at Missouri State and working with the baseball team and being around basketball, and I've always thought a lot of you, so I'm honored to be on.
Thank you, sir. I've thought a lot about you, and I know I've said this before. I've never publicly said it. Maybe I have on Facebook. I don't know. But my fourth grade teacher at Willard North Elementary, I'd come home and it was always a tradition. Mom, dad, and I, my brothers, we'd listen to sports talk growing up. And my fourth grade teacher, I'm sure I drove her nuts a day or two with the evening's past stories, but my teacher, Michelle Sackler, she'll be glad she got a shout out. She always called me the next Art Hains. And I said, boy, those are big shoes to fill. I don't know if I'm ever going to be that great, but you're definitely an inspiration. I'm glad we got to know each other, and reminiscing here real quick. So we got to travel a lot together, my 2 years with Missouri State baseball, kind of talk about, I don't know if you have any funny stories about from those seasons or just that 2015 team in particular, what that meant to you.
Well, this is my 44th and last year doing Missouri State sports on radio, and that was my favorite baseball team, 2015. 2003, we went to the College World Series, but 15 just had a vibe about it, really captured the community, had a bunch of kind of free-spirited guys on the team that pulled for each other, held each other accountable. Jake Berger's in the big leagues now off that team. So that was a lot of fun throughout that year. We hosted a regional and won it, the only time Missouri State has hosted a baseball regional. We were the number 8 national seed, so we were in line to host the super regional as well. But our ballpark wasn't available because the Springfield Cardinals, a AA team, share the ballpark, and they had games that weekend. So we had to play at Arkansas, where we lost a bitterly contested series, 2-1, losing 3-2 on Sunday.
I remember that vividly. And I think the thing that stuck out, obviously being there myself, that team was special. But if you remember, Art, the year before, my first year, I don't even want to repeat our record. I know it was 20-some and 30-some. We were not very good. I remember we went 71 or 72 straight innings without scoring. And we scored the run at Wichita State, of all places, to break. And we thought we had won the national championship, and then to turn around and what a special group. And real quick, just reminiscing. So my first year, if you remember, it was one of the first road trips. And, you and I had traveled together with basketball. We were used to the private planes, the Marriotts, and now I'm with baseball. No disrespect to baseball, loved every minute, but now we're busing. And I remember it was colder than crap on the bus. And you were sitting next to me. And I looked at you and I said, there may have been a curse word in there, but I was like, is it cold? And you were like, get used to it, Franny. Welcome to Coach Gunton's bus.
Gunton always wanted it cold, and then he would be all bundled up with a kit and everything. Well, turn the heat up then if you're cold. But
yeah, love Coach Gunn, but that was the one thing. In hindsight, I think he was preparing me to move to Chicago, though, I think is why he did it.
Must have been all for you.
Yeah, exactly. So obviously Missouri State's transitioning to FCS. Your last game, I'm hoping to be there, Art. Going to be Missouri State against your alma mater, SMU. How special is that going to be? And just that move to FCS. Did you see this coming 5-6 years ago? What's kind of this from your perspective been like?
Yeah, we're going from FCS.
FBS, sorry.
And well, I mean, kind of saw it coming a few years ago, just based on the dynamics. I mean, we've got 26,000 students and a vibrant community, so there are some things in place, but it's still a pretty big swing to go top level football. Yeah, SMU SMU of all teams in here first for our first home game as an FBS program. It's just like a dream come true for me. I went to SMU, my first collegiate broadcast on other than the campus station was an SMU Baylor basketball game in 1976 on 50,000 watt KRLD in Dallas. It was the first basketball game I had ever done. And so I'm going out with another SMU game, only against Missouri State, the school that I've loved now for almost 50 years.
You've been a staple on that campus, and it was so great to see you at that 2015 reunion we had back in January. And you had me on a couple weeks prior when I was back in Springfield, which still to this day, will always mean a lot to me to be on the radio with you. And seeing you, and you got the jersey presented to you, and no one deserved that more than you did, Art. I speak for everybody in Missouri State when we say thank you for all the years of service. It's again, you've been an inspiration, so thank you, and you're part of some of my best childhood memories.
Well, I had a lot of people, still do, come up to me and say how much they enjoyed sports talk, and the thing I enjoyed the most, we had interviews with people locally, regionally, statewide, even nationally, and I enjoyed those, but I really enjoyed the interaction with the callers the most. What's the next caller going to want to talk about? And just got to be ready to pivot to whatever it is. And I enjoyed that and going back and forth with them. Not a shock jock at all. Never was. That's not in my nature.
Right.
Conversation with people. Now, if they want to fight, I'll
yeah.
my opinion, but for the most part, just a good conversation.
For sure. And a lot of the coaches that came through that you got to be around, I think of the Steve Alfords, Barry Hinsons, Conzo obviously is back now, and Charlie Spoonhour, Keith Gooden, obviously. The list goes on and on. What, in your opinion, you're broadcasting these games, but what, just seeing the coaches, a lot of them leave Missouri State, some on their own accord, others, not so much, but seeing them go on to do things like Alford, all of a sudden he's the coach at UCLA. What to you, you were there right next to him, and then, now Alford's at UCLA, Nyla's at George Mason. I mean, the list goes on and on. What does that mean for you as a broadcaster?
Well, when Alford was here, it was his first Division I coaching job. He was a young coach. It was Camelot. We had the movie star coach. He was still a huge name. He wasn't that far removed from his playing days in Indiana, winning a national championship. Then we went to see him play at Iowa about 3 times, and UCLA came to Mizzou, and a bunch of us went up there for that game. We've kind of stayed in touch, and that's been great to see him go on to great heights. I mean, Spoonhour was the GOAT at Missouri State, and what a character he was. Just a great speaker. I mean, he could be on the Tonight Show. I mean, he was Bob Uecker level funny. But it was a great basketball coach also, and we hated it when we lost him. We went to St. Louis,
right.
Which thought, where's he going? What's he going there for? But he loved the Cardinals, for one thing.
Yeah.
And there were a couple of other factors as well. But then he ended up at UNLV, and he'd always loved Vegas. So we really miss him.
For sure. And seeing Jay come back to campus, his son, has been great. And Charlie's grandson, Charlie Spoonhour Jr., is pitching for the Bears now. So, the Spoonhour name lives on there at Missouri State.
Granddaughter's on the cross-country team.
Oh, wow. Okay. I did not know that, but great. Yeah. They, even though, Spoon was a little before my time, it still, I felt, being with men's basketball, I felt the impact that Spoonhour to this day. Every time I go into Hammons, I think about Spoon's Temple of Doom and just what that, and even the Final Four, I know Cheryl Burnett very well, but, I wasn't really around that team, but there's just something about that Hammons Student Center that I love. JQH, or I guess they call it Great Southern Arena now. I don't know, but there's something about Hammons Student Center that I wish I could go back and see one more game there,
Well, you may have your chance. I'm told, kind of confidentially, but I'm going to say it, that this year. And that would be wildly popular just physically connected to Great Southern Bank Arena. It was a special place. It was a lot more intimate than our current arena, and that place got to rocking.
For sure. And so 1999, the Bears make the Sweet 16. And just from your perspective, being on that run, and the reason I ask, I have a lot of listeners out of New Jersey. I remember you telling me one time, I said, what was like being at, you guys practiced at, or they practiced at Seton Hall, and there was a picture in the newsletter of you there watching the practice. And I can't remember if it was you or Mike Keltner or somebody. I was like, what's the area around Seton Hall like? And they were like, crappy, you know? And then I moved to Jersey and they're like, campus nice, stay away. But like just that whole, and everybody knew Alford was leaving. It wasn't public, but it was pretty much known he was leaving. So like that run and then Alford leaves. From your perspective, what was that kind of experience like?
Oh, it was just fantastic. It's a roller coaster. We went to Charlotte and won 2 games there, beat Tennessee by 30.
Mm-hmm.
Go to Brendan Byrne Arena, as it was called then, in the Meadowlands, played Duke. My kids went up there on a plane. I went with the team the night before, so they came accompanied by our alumni director, Julie Ebersold. We ran New York City, and some of our people were on the outside line at the Today Show with their gear on, and that was a special time.
Yeah, it was amazing. And I remember the '03 College World Series run too. You talked a lot about that. Like just so many. I mean, you and I could talk for hours about Missouri State, but I want to talk too about you, Art, and kind of your career. Obviously your accolades speak for themselves, but what, as you kind of set onto your next journey here, what will be the one or two things? And I know this isn't a fair question, but that will just always forever remain with you about your time broadcasting the Bears and the Chiefs?
Well, I mean, with the Bears, I think just the being a part of the community, the campus, and then the greater community and Southwest Missouri with the reach and popularity of the Bears, which has admittedly dwindled a little bit in recent years, but it was really booming back in the '90s and early 2000s, and we're able to touch so many people, meet so many great people. But as for the games, probably the Sweet 16 in basketball stands out. The College World Series in '03 won the regional at Nebraska. We didn't know who was going to pitch in the final game, but it turned out to be Bob Zimmerman, who was mostly a reliever, and he pitched 7 scoreless innings. He had a Cobra. Omaha.
Yep.
Omaha, the Cobra led us to Omaha, Nebraska. We
Yep.
had Ohio State first for the Super Regional, and that was a 2-game sweep. And I remember going in there to the Varsity Club, which is a renowned hangout at Ohio State on campus. This is Sunday night now. They're getting ready to close. It's about 10:30. And my son and I go in there and say, "You still open?" He said, "Getting ready to close." I said, "Well, they're getting ready to be about 50 people come in here." So you're, well, sure enough, they did. And Keith Gutton, who doesn't drink,
No.
of them, and I think he had a beer with us. I mean, that was a pretty big occasion to go to the college.
Yeah. Coach never, if you remember those road trips, he always got a water. I remember he'd always get a water. Of course, I don't want to call out who drank, who didn't. I'll be the first to admit I loved my adult beverages on the road. We could we got some stories, but do you remember, Art? Oh, my mom was just up here in DC, and I brought it up to her and we kind of laughed about it. I was ashamed at the time, but my second year, that College World Series, the first road trip, we went to Dallas. And there was some, we always stayed at the same hotel there in Dallas. And there was some, I think it was like Saltgrass or something, and it was the first road trip. I had not had a adult beverage with lump in 6 or 7 months. And I may have had one or two more, and the whole bus ride back to Springfield, I was like, oh, never again. And, winning cured a lot, but I don't know if you remember that. I just remember walking by your table and I was like, I'm going back to the hotel.
I bet you have broken that vow though since then.
Yeah, well, just fun times. And that's the one thing about baseball. It was Coach Gooden was probably one of the most relaxing coaches I've ever, his whole deal was just show up on time, be ready to perform. And, don't end up in the back of a police car and, are on the front page of and we're cool, and that was the one thing. He let us be us as long as we did our job, which winning helps, I think. But basketball was a little more strict, though. I will admit that. I kept it level headed with basketball,
that varied by the coach what the culture was, but they keep a pretty tight rein on them in basketball.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. All right,
Baseball,
I do. Oh, go ahead.
on the road, give them some money, and be back at a certain time.
Yep, exactly. That was, curfew was what curfew was, but I think that's what made our team so close, was just that type of camaraderie. And the other thing too is I really felt like Art, you certainly, Mike Keltner, you guys were part of the team. It wasn't like you all were part of the team. And from a broadcasting perspective, I don't want to speak for you, but I just felt like you could broadcast the game from a perspective of, because you were part of the team. You weren't on the outside looking in. Did that make your job? I assume it made your job a lot easier because you had the access to the information you needed to, or was it just, that's just how it always was in broadcasting with this type of role?
No, I mean that certainly does when you know the players more as people, and
Yeah.
pick up little things in their background that maybe aren't on the biography sheet in the media guide, and you can use that to amplify your broadcast. And you don't want to tell too much, but things that are interesting to the listener. That mutual trust helps out a lot with the broadcast.
Yeah, and I'm just kind of reminiscing here. The one, and I don't know how I still remember some of these stories, but they're funny. So I'm close with Eric Denning. And of course, you and Eric sat right next to each other, usually on the road. And we were at Indiana State. It would have been my first year, so 2014. And we were just horrible. And Gunn had got thrown out of the game. And Eric took his scorebook and threw it against the window. And I was right in front. And I turned around, and after the game, pardon my French, but he goes, "I did that to scare the shit out of Art because I was pissed." And I don't know if you reacted, but I was just like, the fact that he was like, "I did that just to scare Art," was like, well,
Supposed to be even keel, and he was not. I mean, he would very, very personally when they
yeah.
weren't doing well, and you would know how he felt. He wasn't on the air, fortunately, but we could tell that he was not happy.
Yeah, for sure. Art, a couple of other questions here. So, Missouri State start off at Metter Park in baseball, and I know we're only talking baseball, basketball, but then they go to Price Cutter Park. I love Price Cutter personally. I understand how far off campus it was, but then you move into this beautiful facility called Hammons Field, still used to this day by the team. What was that going from Metter Park to Hammons Field and everything in between? What was that like?
Well, Metter Park was a city park, still is, very rudimentary. One bathroom, cinder block building, and it was not nice at all. But it served us well for many years. Price Cutter Park was then built in neighboring Ozark. It's Death Valley, 20-foot walls all the way around. Run there. Ryan Howard got cheated out of a lot of home runs there. And then we go to Hammons Field, that's like a big league park, built to those specs, only much lower, of course, in terms of capacity. And it's been a dream come true for Southwest Missouri. John Q. Hammons made it happen by building that park and making it available both to Missouri State, and then having the park enabled Springfield to lure the Cardinals AA team, and they've been here since 2005.
And I'd be remiss to not to bring up, a lot of the players you mentioned, Ryan Howard, you saw Bill Miller come through, Ross Detweiler, the list goes on and on. So seeing those type of players, and then, they went on to have great big league careers. And do you still keep in touch with a lot of those guys?
Some of them. Brad Ziegler had a long big league career as a reliever, and he lives in Overland Park, goes to church with my son and his family. And
Wow.
I see him occasionally. Drake Baldwin is in the big leagues now with the Atlanta Braves and doing well as a rookie. So, the Bears have had an impact in the big leagues.
For sure they have. And I'd be remiss, Art, not to bring up that 2010-2011 Missouri State Conference Championship team. And this call will forever be with me when Adam Leonard, obviously they won, but then when they came back down 15 against Creighton, and you had that call with Leonard throwing the ball across just to run the timeout. And, Konzo leaves after that year. I think there was a lot of disappointment. In hindsight, I think people understand why he left, but it was disappointing, but, not making the tournament. But that team was special. Can you kind of talk a little bit about that? Yep. So can you kind of talk about that team a little bit, 2010 and 2011?
Well, and that was my favorite basketball team. The only Missouri Valley Conference regular season championship the Bears won, and they beat Northern Iowa, Creighton, and Wichita on the road, bang, 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 right out the gate in conference play. And then still had to beat Wichita State on the final day of the season at Great Southern Bank Arena, and sold out. ESPN, huge event for the conference championship, and the Bears won, and confetti came down from the rafters. And Wichita State was such a bitter rival in basketball and baseball for many years. That was the sweetest victory ever for Missouri State, in my opinion.
For sure. Last question, Art, and thank you again for doing this. Last question, and not to put you on the spot, but you're retiring, and I'm gonna enjoy every minute of you with the rest of the games. But for Art, what's next after that SMU game? Obviously, I assume you're gonna stay connected in some way with the university. Will we see you at games? What's next for you?
Yeah, I'll be at all the games, but I've bought season tickets for football. I won't need them for the first game, but after that, my daughter and I will be in the stands, and I'll be at all the games cheering on the Bears. I'll be as big a fan as I am on the air in the stands. And that's what I intend to do, to continue following them. And of course, I follow the Royals religiously. Got up to opening day again this year, which
Awesome.
I've been almost every year since 1976, with the exception of 4 years that I lived in Dallas. So, yeah, I'm very, very gratified, of course, by what happened in 2014 and 15 with them.
For sure. Well, Art, this has been awesome catching up. Always good to see you when I'm back home. My family says hello. Please tell your family hello. And again, just thank you for everything. And I think the world of Missouri State, and it's because of people like you who, huge part of my childhood. And one of the reasons why I chose Missouri State was because of great people who I knew I'd be around like you. So thank you so much, Art.
You're welcome, Fran. Good luck, and say hi to your family.
Thank you. Art Hains.